Okie dokie. So to generate a test class for customer repository, let's right click and then in here, generate and test. Make sure it's JUnit 5. Leave the name as it is, destination package as it is. Setup, let's select this and let's tick both of these methods in here. Okay. And now we have an empty test class in here. So let me just remove this import because we don't need it. And the way that we're going to configure this is as follows. So first, let's bring in the private, and then the under test will be customer repository under and then test. Then we actually have to initialize this class in here, and I'm going to do it the wrong way first so that you understand exactly how this is working. So in here, if I say at and then Spring Boot test, so I told you that you shouldn't really use this annotation because it will load the application context for you with a bunch of beans that you don't need, right? Now, this is one way of doing it. Next, let's in here, so we're going to say at and then auto wired so that we actually have hold of this object right here, which is picked up from the application context, so under test. So saying this is the same thing as what we've been doing so far throughout this course by having the constructor, and then basically when the application starts, this will be injected for us and then assign it to this. So in tests, you might just ignore all of this together and you might have the at and then auto wired before the field in here. So let's just do it this way. The other thing that I want to do also is say at and then auto wired and then private application and then context from Spring Framework. So we want this guy because I want to show you again. So if you forgot, the number of beans gets loaded. So here before each, let's just perform south and then application context dot and then get bean definition count. And I want to stick a breakpoint in here. Now, in order for this test to run, you have to make sure that the database that we've been using so far throughout this course, so the one found within Docker Compose, is up and running. So if it's not, it will fail. So let me show you. So let me go back to customer repository test. And if I basically debug this, I just want to show you something first. So let's just debug. And you can see that this stopped in here. And if I click on this, you see that we have hold of the application context and we've loaded the customer repository in here. Also the application context, and we can look into the bean counts, but we have basically a print, but I'll show you this in a second. So if I just resume this, and I have to do it again because there's two tests, you can see that they both passed. And here you can see that 230 beans available. So get bean definition count. The same for the second test. So we don't want this, but I'll show you this in a second, how we're going to solve this issue. The other thing is that if I stop my database, so here, if I open up my terminal, so right within IntelliJ, and if I say Docker and then compose and then stop, so this has stopped the Postgres container. And if I run it, so let's just run the test again this time, you can see that this fails because it cannot connect to the running instance. Now obviously we don't want this at all, right? So we should be configuring this test to connect to our test container, and we'll change that in a second. But let me actually start my database. So Docker and then compose and then start. So this starts the database and we're good to go. Next, let me show you the best way of testing JPA repositories.